So I have a series of questions I am happy to answer. The first one is from Matt Lawrence of Asbury Park, New Jersey, and he asks, do you think there is anything inherent about being born and raised in New Jersey that influences your body of work? First, of course, if I had not grown up in New Jersey, the settings and the fabric of my stories would be very different and unlikely to take place in New Jersey. And in fact, many of my films, they could has easily have been shot in Ohio or even, I don't know, Nebraska, Missouri, because the suburbs, which is where I grew up, are an element of the fabric of the way in which most people live in our country. I don't think it's New Jersey in particular, but the nature of, I think, of living in the suburbs, the seductions of it, and the ways in which that inform and shape one's character and what that says about who we are. The next question is from Nicholas Kuhi from Lauderdale, Minnesota, and he asks, why do you choose film as the creative outlet for telling your stories? Well, Nicholas, I pursued many other creative outlets when I was younger. I think I've been writing since I'm reading. I wrote poetry and fiction, but I don't think I was particularly gifted. But I had always a sense of a narrative, I think, built into the way in which I wanted to express myself. I wanted for many years to be a musician, and I think I would have become one had I had talent. But I didn't, and later in college, I think I pursued playwriting, and I wrote many bad plays, none of which, fortunately, were produced. I love photography as well, but I don't really like touching cameras or any sort of technology. I don't feel comfortable with that. In fact, when I finally went to film school, I had special dispensations so that I wouldn't have to shoot anyone's movie. You know, I had felt at so many things for so long, it felt, that when I finally made some short films at film school and I saw the response, that was a kind of encouragement I'd never had. And I suppose we're all somewhat responsive in a way, a kind of behavioral conditioning, I suppose. You know, if someone likes what you do, there's a good chance you'll pursue more of that. I don't have the kind of character, I think, that is strong enough to have sustained the blows of universal derision and scorn. So since people, as I say, responded to what I did when I was a young, aspiring filmmaker, that gave me the confidence I needed to pursue this further. The next question is from Max Klein in Erwena, Pennsylvania. What is the biggest misconception you think people have about you and your work? I know I'm working in very tricky sort of terrain, and I understand there are limits to the level of control I can have over the way in which my work is absorbed and seen. There are those for whom some of these subjects or the way in which it's dealt, that it touches some sort of chord that is somewhat discomforting, something that makes people not want to celebrate what I do. You know, I suppose it reminds me of course, the way in which, you know, when Welcome to the Dollhouse and first was shown, I remember how half the audience was laughing at the trials and tribulations of the young character. The other half of the audience was angry at the first half. How can you laugh? This is too troubling, too sad, too sorrowful. Well, for me, it's both sorrowful and comedic or ironic, what have you, that the comedy and the pathos are inextricably intertwined. And so, as a result of this, I think there's a lot of ambiguity. It's all fraught with ambiguity. And so there's no, I suppose, firm anchoring. Therefore, it seems inevitable that people will have very widely varying responses to what I do. The next question is from Hannah Small of Boulder, Colorado. What was the genesis of life during wartime? It's funny because after I had made Happiness, I never imagined ever making any sort of sequel to that film, to those characters, and it just goes to show that my imagination was limited. About 10 years after finishing that movie, I just one day wrote the first scene of this movie, and I liked what I had written, and I wondered, is there a movie here? Is there more to explore? And I thought about the cast and how if I were able to recast it, I could find new nuances and meaning that I couldn't otherwise achieve had I kept the same cast. And that made it a lot more interesting and exciting for me. Of course, I knew of the Douanel movies that Truffaut had made. There's something always compelling, riveting, really, even about the same actor playing the same part over a number of years, and in that Michael Apted 28 Up sort of way, because really what jumps out at you is the sense of mortality. That's what's writ large. But I liked the idea of freeing myself from the constraints of the literalness of what had been established. For example, I loved Dylan Baker and what he had done in Happiness, but I felt for this movie I wanted the characters as a kind of a husk, a shell of a walking dead sort of person, a ghost of a person. And I wanted with someone with a certain level of gravitas that I felt someone like Kieran Hines would be more appropriate for. I felt Paul Rubens, also a very funny character like John Lovitz can be. But of course he has a whole history that audiences are well aware of, which I think lends a certain kind of poignancy to his performance. And I think it's also somewhat revelatory that even exists within him. I didn't want anyone that would evoke Phil Hoffman, who had left such an imprint. And so I had to approach things from a very different angle. That's why it's really a kind of quasi-sequel, I suppose. And I like that free-spirited, free-ranging advantage, let's say, that recasting the movie gave me that I wouldn't have had I had to retain the same cast. And I suppose my hope was that if it feels fresh to me, that it would to others. The next question is from Garrett Solomon of Winnetka, Illinois. Since Life During Wartime is a loose sequel to your 1998 film Happiness, is it necessary for me to see Happiness before seeing Life During Wartime? It's certainly not necessary. In fact, it may be advantageous not to have seen Happiness before seeing Life During Wartime. Certainly in terms of narrative story, there's no need for any sort of preface, any sort of preparation. It's a complete work on its own. There are certain advantages in that the way in which all of these characters are fresh and uncluttered, unburdened by previous incarnations. On the other hand, I suppose there could be an advantage to having seen Happiness first, insofar as one can appreciate the play that I have with the way in which I've altered the characters and developed these stories. I wanted to begin the movie in the same way, and very literally in the same way, so that if for those who have seen Happiness, it's as if you're seeing the same movie again, only, of course, something's off, something's different, these are different actors. I like playing with that sense of expectation. And so that those who have seen a happiness presume that they know where this is going. And I try to, of course, be ahead of the audience and then upend certain expectations so that at the end of the scene, my hope is that that scene can serve to disarm those who have seen happiness from the expectations of things being all the same, and to let one's guard down and to just embrace the film and the characters as they are. So let go of that and try and enjoy this on its own terms. The next question is from Bill Melidoneus from Brooklyn, New York, and he asks, what is the contemporary political relevance that is a thread throughout life during wartime? One of the stories that always sticks in my head of that time is when Giuliani was our mayor. As horrific as that moment was of 9/11, it also brought out some very special, very beautiful moments, very beautiful gestures from the people who lived here and around the country, who came together in a time of crisis. And I think the question in everyone's heart was, how can I help? What can I do? And I'll never forget the response that Giuliani provided, which was to go shopping, to go on with your life, almost, I suppose, as if this hadn't happened. And there was something so obscene about the idea of going shopping, the kind of consumerist memo there, that I think was underlying some sense of what I was about when I was making this movie. I think Joy and her efforts to do good, to make this a better world, for me, in some sense, couldn't help but echo our attempts at doing good by invading Iraq. That sometimes the best of intentions, well, they just don't work out the way you planned them. So I think the movie was infused something with the spirit of a political crisis that the country has been going through since embarking on this, or I should say these wars. I suppose it's made most explicit, of course, when the character played by Ali Sheedy makes some sort of outraged comment about how we're a country at war. We have an easy time, I think, talking all about the war and criticizing it and questioning it and so forth. But it's very, for many reasons, the sense of war is very abstract, since it's not like we were taxed more heavily. It's not like there's a draft, and it's a very discrete segment of the population that's going there, that's risking their lives, and a section of society that has little overlap with that privileged class that can engage so sharply and insightfully about the philosophical, political, intellectual nature of this engagement. The next question is from Antoine Mabilon. I'm guessing that's how it's pronounced, from Paris, France. What role does religion, specifically Judaism, play in this film? Well, in this movie, Life During Wartime, I made the characters explicitly Jewish. I just didn't want to hide that. I liked the idea of the young boy preparing for his bar mitzvah, which is a kind of rite of passage of becoming a man, so to speak. And it's dovetailed nicely with, I think, the character of his father and his own story with his other son as well. So I saw no reason to avoid the subjects. I embraced it and used it in ways that I felt would be dramatically appropriate. In Happiness, I saw that same family as a Jewish family. I just didn't think it particularly relevant to the story that was being dramatized there. I suppose in my head, Trish, she married Dylan Baker, who was not Jewish, and there you have it. She paid the price. The next question is from Brent Saleh of Salt Lake City, Utah. A big theme of your film is forgiveness, and putting entirely new faces on your characters forces the audience to distance them from their actions in the prior film, reminding us that people change with age and that we are not necessarily defined by our past mistakes. But your choice of actors also brings new connotations to some of the characters. Most notably, many of us instantly associate Paul Reubens and Michael K. Williams with Pee Wee Herman and Omar from The Wire, respectively. I'm curious to what extent you intended the audience to make these associations. Well, Brent, yes, I think there's truth to what you say here about one of the values of recasting the film. While I did know, of course, about Paul Reubens and had met Paul before, Omar, I had never seen The Wire prior to casting him. I really cast him because of his audition. Many people come in and read for you, and he is a remarkable actor who jumped out at me. So I only learned after the fact about the full scope of the work he had done on that show as Omar. Only learned afterwards that the character Omar was Barack Obama's favorite TV character. When I think back, I got exactly who I wanted from many of these. Meaning when I say exactly, some of these people were my first choice that I knew going in. I knew I wanted Allison Janney, and I knew I wanted Ali Sheedy, but it's not that every, I think, actor had to have some sort of cultural baggage that would be relevant. But certainly one has to be conscious of that baggage if one casts the actor. The next question is from Spencer Lee of Brooklyn, New York. How important was the physicality and or the physical traits of the people you cast in connoting certain basic kinds of information about what has happened to these characters over the years? What do these things mean? Gee, these are good questions. Ciarán Hinds, as I tried to emphasize earlier, has great gravitas, a kind of heaviness. I felt he could bring that weight to the role that I didn't think would come in quite the same way from Dylan Baker. His hauntedness was something I very much responded to. It was the intensity and the physical, the contrast that Michael Kenneth Williams, that his character had vis-a-vis Shirley Henderson, that I very much responded to as well. And that she, being a kind of social worker of sorts, would very much respond to someone who is not only scarred literally, but scarred figuratively. And this, of course, becomes a test of, I suppose, the courage of her own convictions. The next question is from Stephen Pasechnik of Grand Rapids, Michigan. How do you deal with child actors when handling heavy topics like incest and child molestation? When you cast a child actor, you are, certainly in a movie like mine, you are casting the whole family in some sense. You have to meet with the parents and be fully open with them about what your aims are, what you have in mind. For many reasons, you can't be anything but straightforward with them. There were many talented child actors who auditioned who, after meeting with the parents, removed themselves from the list of contenders. When you film these children, when you work with them on set, the parents are always present every day that they are on set. I find that if you lend a certain respect to the child and treat him seriously as an actor, the child will give you gold. It's about respect and trust and faith. I think they make a leap of faith in you as much as you do in them. You want ultimately for the child, for the family, to take pride in the work that they work so hard to achieve. From David Rogers in Lucerne, California. Children and molestation are a common theme in your films. Why do you tend to make movies about subjects most other filmmakers would rather not talk about? I don't know. As far as children are concerned, a lot of people like working with children because children are kind of, I think, a way to see who we are as adults, particularly if they're at that on the cusp of adolescence. That there's a kind of vulnerability and openness that exposes some of the truths of who we are as adults. But when it comes to molestation and other more troubling subjects, well, they aren't very commercial subjects. So unless they're a source of entertainment. When there's rape and murder, it's all fine as long as it's in the service of entertainment. When it's not in the service of entertainment, it's much more difficult to get financing. The subjects of rape, molestation, and so forth, I mean, it's on the cover of tabloids and on radio talk shows and TV every day of the week. So I think the public is well inured to this reality. There's nothing new about that. But I try to approach the subject seriously. Trick of it is that it's also not without a certain kind of irony or wit. And that's where I think I get a little bit into trouble with many of the viewers. It's a question of sensibility, I think, about in terms of who's going to respond to the work. And it's unpredictable. Some people presume that if a person has experienced some trauma of being molested or raped as a child, that they will be terribly offended by what I do. But there's certainly no evidence to support that claim, based on at least the people who have come up to me in a non-hostile manner. It becomes a bit of a challenge to get to people to think intelligently and to respond emotionally in an appropriate way to the reality of these crimes. What that says about not only about people with these afflictions and these experiences, but what that says about ourselves and our own capacities of empathy, what those limits are, of forgiveness, and so forth. The next question is from Eliana Bucknell of Minneapolis. The character of Timmy, played by Dylan Riley Snyder, articulates the film's main theme of forgiveness and raises the moral questions in the film. Was this an audience concern? That is, do you think it's more palatable for viewers if such issues are voiced by children because of their innocence? If not, do you believe that it is through children that we are forced to confront such issues? It's true that a child like Timmy, the one that Dylan Riley Snyder plays, because of his innocence, that we become more open and sensitive to the experience of examining some of these questions and issues that the movie raises. He approaches things in a way that is simple in a good way, cutting to the core of questions that are unanswerable and unknowable. I think that that's probably a reason why I often cast children is because they are in some way of getting us to examine some of the larger questions that trouble us, whether they be philosophical or political, what have you, and force us, one hopes, to examine or re-examine some of our preconceptions. I look at my movies really as stories that me as an 11-year-old can follow and emotionally connect to. That and that I hope that on that level, and that first primal, primitive level, that they can connect with audiences. The next question is from Matt Cannon of Feasterville, Pennsylvania. In Life During Wartime, Paul Reubens plays Andy, the deceased boyfriend, played by John Lovitz in Happiness. Was there a connection between his character and the father apparition in Bergman's Fanny and Alexander? Not that I'm aware of, but I am intrigued by this connection. I don't think I would ever presume to make such a comparison, but I would love to examine this myself. The next question is from John Dombacher of Los Angeles, California, and he writes, much of your work is based on unspoken things between people. How do you use your own subconscious in your writing and in your direction of actors? Well, yes, it's always what people are not saying that is always most compelling. It's what makes it riveting, even. If it's all spoken, I don't think we'd be very interested. No. If your subconscious is not working for you, you really have to find another line of work. The subconscious, it's a mysterious power in your mind that enables you to find, to discover what the story, to shape it. I always say that the process of writing, it's a creative one, not an intellectual one. After you finish writing, you can analyze and restructure. But the actual heart of it, what gets you to put pen to paper, that's a mystery that only the subconscious can answer. The next question is from Scott Miliano of New York. What's the significance of the gumdrops? I'm not much into symbolism per se, but I can say that I love the idea of these gumdrops that evoke some sense of childhood and childhood innocence, and that image was really captured, I think, that connection for this tormented Bill Maplewood and connected him with the son that he never knew, really. The genesis, though, of the gumdrops, which I loved, is actually interesting to, I think, an aspiring filmmaker, because initially I wanted to have, when the father comes to talk to his son in the college dormitory, traditionally that kind of a character would ask for a drink. But I didn't want to have him ask for a drink. I wanted him to ask for a Diet Pepsi or a Diet Coke, I forgot. But being the filmmaker I am, Coke and Pepsi refused me. I'm on the blacklist of virtually every corporation. So I had to come up with another idea, and I gave him water. But this also inspired the whole, I wanted him to have gumdrops as, and so I think what's inspiring is that when you're pushed into a corner, sometimes you get ideas that are better than what you had initially written. That being given terrible restrictions that can force certain kinds of inspiration, and I think the gumdrops, that's an example of that. The next question is from Al Topich of Little Rock, Arkansas. It seems that you enjoy making the audience feel awkward. What do you take away from this interaction, and what truths about society are you trying to get at? Well, I don't know that it's awkwardness. Some people may feel awkward, but that's not so meaningful to me. I want to provoke an audience to be moved, to laugh, to engage in a way with ideas and themes that are bandied about or discussed in popular culture, but to get them to be addressed from another angle entirely, to try and make it a little bit fresh. I don't presume that any of my movies will change the world. I think that would be a foolish goal, since I don't know of any movie that has quite succeeded in that way. Maybe Battle of Algiers. The next is from Timmy Brothers of Worcester, Massachusetts. Have you watched your films with your mother? Let me think. Has there been a time? No, she watched. My mom has watched the movies after I had already premiered them. I'm trying to remember the circumstances. There may have been a premiere that she attended when I was there. My mom, my dad, my family, they're always very proud of the work that I've done. And I'd always feel, I think, that it's always so interesting for them since they see no connection to the worlds in which I grew up. The next question is from Greg Sesney of Northport, Long Island. His question is, this film was shot on the Red camera. What influenced you to shoot digital on this project? Budget? Aesthetic interests? Are you happy with its decision? Well, yes, it was a budget issue, and we couldn't afford film, given the requirements of production. But it was something that I embraced, and I had a cameraman, Ed Lockman, who could transform the look of this film into something quite beautiful. I don't think it's a question of shooting on the Red versus 35. It's a question of who your cinematographer is. If you have someone who is an artist working with you or not. What he can do is to transform that which is generic, that on the surface looks uncompelling, undramatic, and transform it into something arresting, something that surprises us with its poetry, something that eludes us in the day-to-dayness of our lives, to transform that which may be deemed ugly or banal into something otherworldly, and to understand the seduction of the suburbs. It's easy to knock them. They've been knocked, since Revolutionary Road time, but to expose what in fact is compelling about them, that's much more interesting to me. The next question is from Jason Fife of Temecula, California. What is the relationship between the visual style of this film and its themes? That is, what kind of world are you trying to create or is most appropriate for your characters? Well, I think on this film, we created Florida, southern Florida, which to me is very flat and has a certain kinds of a color palette that's very seductive. We shot the movie in Puerto Rico, and it was difficult to create Florida, but I'm very pleased with what we were able to fabricate there. I think I wanted, some of these places to feel, have a kind of generic quality to them. This is the land that the character Trish tried to escape, to reshape, redefine, reinvent herself, to erase the past. It's a place where you can go tabula rasa, a place where you can escape the past. The cleanness of that look, the plasticity of it, and maybe that's not the right word. I should say I'll say the cleanness of it, so meshed with Trish's needs psychologically. Okay, the next question is from Ryan Estabrooks of Nashville, Tennessee. It's always interesting to me when I hear of a filmmaker having an idea mapped out for a scene in pre-production and then having to completely change it during filming due to unforeseen complications. What was the biggest unexpected challenge in this film, and what did you have to do to overcome that challenge? The challenge was to figure out how to make Puerto Rico look like Florida, South Florida, because I had no idea. I just assumed Puerto Rico, it's warm, it's going to look the same, but it really looks nothing like it. It's very hilly. The colors are very different. That was the biggest challenge visually, was how do I capture that? And we found little bits and pieces in Puerto Rico with careful framing that could make that work. But I don't think we had anything that came up that forced me to completely change anything that I had initially planned. From Tyler Henson of Coos Bay, Oregon. What is your inspiration and where do you think your ideas come from? Do you have any big influences? Well, influences. Beyond growing up in the suburbs of New Jersey, I have to say I grew up watching TV like any regular all-American kid. I can remember when I was 11 telling my mom and saying this with pride that I think I had watched only 6 hours that day. I was pretty intravenously connected. And then when I was about 13 or 14, I suddenly stopped watching entirely. I didn't really learn about serious filmmakers until I got to college. Truffaut, Godard, etc. That's really where I learned what the possibilities of cinema could encompass. When I went to college, it was before the VHS, in fact, and so there were film societies, as they were called, on campus, and every night of the week you could see projected a Nick Gray movie, followed by a Groucho Marx, followed by a Maya Deren, and capped off with a Satyajit Ray. And I watched so many movies, or as many nights as I could while I was in college, probably primarily because I was socially maladroit, and it was a good way to avoid having to engage in the healthy spirit of social life. But that is where I really lapped it all up. And I didn't even have to understand the movies. It didn't matter. I had to keep watching. That's where I learned what film was about. Because and when I started in college, I still wasn't clear what the difference was between a director and a producer. I don't think I really even understood until I actually started making films. The next question is from Travis Wellborn of Dana Point, California. I like that name. Have you ever been shocked by a review or statement about any of your films? No. But I think one of my favorite things that anyone has said about me was something that Hoberman wrote when he was comparing me and John Waters. And I'm not even sure if he meant this in a complimentary way, but he said that with John Waters, he makes the alien human, but me, I make the human alien. And I always loved that. I think there is a certain level of truth there, but only a half-truth. But that was, I think, one of the wittiest things that I think has been written about me. The next question is from Catherine Velasco of Los Angeles, California. What is the most valuable lesson you've learned from film school? It's interesting. I don't know that there's any particular lesson that I've learned there. No, there is. One of the first things I learned was that there was an assignment to make a 4-minute film, a 3-minute film in your first year, and I was kind of in awe about how, even with a 3 or 4-minute film, how remarkably tedious a film could be in only 3 minutes. And I didn't know that was possible. And it forced one to examine what is it that makes one film engaging and another not. So that really always stuck with me. I mean, what got me to even apply to film school was, I remember I was in California, and there was a night of thesis films from UCLA students that was being screened. I had read that these filmmakers had all gone on to deals with studios and were going on to success. And so I wanted to see what those films could be that would inspire such careers. And I watched these thesis films, and I was astonished at the remarkable, just how remarkably uninteresting they all were. How really bad I thought they were, and that's really what inspired me to go to film school, because I thought, if I can't do something more engaging than that, I really don't want to be a filmmaker. The next question is from Philip Puente of Chicago, Illinois. You teach at NYU. In your opinion, do you feel that film school is important for aspiring filmmakers? Well, for some. It really depends on who you are. For me, I did go to NYU film school. I went for 2 years and then dropped out. And yet, had I not gone there, I don't think I'd have had a career. It gave me a kind of confidence that I didn't know I could ever have, because everything feeds into what you do. I think I came to photography via still photography. I mean, there are so many photographers that I reference every time I shoot a movie. With Life During Wartime, I think we pulled out Larry Sultan and Joel Sternfeld. I often may have references from different photographers for what I'm looking for. That was separate from film school, I think. But that said, just because I don't want to touch the camera doesn't mean the composition and the way in which a shot is designed is of no interest. On the contrary, even as I write each scene of the film, I'm imagining how I want to film it. I'm thinking of this visually, what the camera is doing when and if I need to push in and so forth. Just as much as I think about this as a producer, as in, how much is this going to cost? How much time is this going to take to film? So the film school, the one good thing about film school is it is such a nightmare making films. At the end of every shoot, just nobody wants to even talk to each other. It's just so stressful. But I think working with a healthier budget with people that are professional is a good thing. It's so if it's rough in film school, some of that pain is removed once you yourself are no longer both the production designer, costume designer, location manager, and AD. The next question is from Shelby Spanknoble of Wellsville, Kansas. What film of yours is the most personal? Well, personal. I suppose they're all equally personal. It's sort of like asking which are they autobiographical. I suppose I could say they're all autobiographical, even though none of it actually happened. It's just emotionally I'm connected to all of my films. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made them. The last question is from Melina Gills of Capital Federal in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Do you see yourself leaving suburbia and venturing into other realms of the United States experience? Well, I have. I mean, and you have to remember, though, that most Americans live in the suburbs. So it's actually more anomalous to talk about characters in the city, since they are the minority. It's really a question of story. I've said things now as opposed to just the suburbs. I've gone as far afield, I suppose, story-wise, as, let's see, I've gone down to Florida, I've gone to Kansas, but I don't know. I suppose there's the story that the Isaiah Berlin discussion of the fox and the hedgehog. I think the fox, as I recall, if I'm correct, is the one who knows a little about a lot of things. and the hedgehog being the one who really digs deeper into one particular subject. I suppose the writing's on the wall as far as where I go, where I land.